So good evening. My name is Dr. Chris Slininger, and welcome to Heal the Brain, Heal the Body. Now, this seminar actually is one of a series of seminars I do that follow the same context, the same line of thought, and it really comes from this one quote that I love to show at the beginning of every single seminar I do. And it comes from Ralph Waldo Emerson. He said, "As to the methods, there may be a million and then some, but principles are few. The man who grasps principles can successfully select his own methods, but the man who tries methods while ignoring principles is sure to have trouble." And I think this statement is really relevant to health care. When we talk about health care, there are ways to manage your health. There are diets, there are exercise programs, there are medical treatments. There are so many things out there that you can do to try to improve your health. But if you don't really firmly grasp the principles of how health works in the human body, you're not going to fully understand how to make decisions for yourself independent of a healthcare provider. And look, I'm a doctor, so when I talk with people, it's very easy when somebody comes to me to almost take the situation and try to take command of it, right? I can say, "Welcome to my office. I'll take care of your health. I'm in control here." But the real reality of it is, I don't actually control your health. I don't give you health. I don't hand you health. I don't heal a cut. I don't heal a disease. Doctors don't heal. See, doctor means teacher. The best thing that I can do is, instead of try to command your health and be in control and manage the way your body functions, if instead I try to find out what's in the way of you experiencing the best health you've ever been able to experience, the best health you could experience, and I try to get those things out of your life, then naturally, just by natural design, you're going to experience the best health you've ever experienced. And as my role for a teacher, I may be trying to remove obstacles. Some of them are things we can talk about. Some of them are things that I need to do. But if I can teach you the principles of how health works, then all of a sudden you're going to realize that you are very independent in your pursuit of health. You can actually pursue health on your own. You can make decisions in your life. Look, I don't know about you, but I've never met a doctor who sits there and says, "Hey, I'm your doctor now," which means I will never leave your side. Literally never. If you sleep, I'll be there. If you eat, I'll be there. If you're picking food from a menu, I'll be there. If you're trying to figure out what you should do in the morning, in the evening, in the night, I'll be there. I've never seen a doctor do that. That would be completely and utterly dependent on another individual to experience health, and you're not made that way. You're made to experience freedom in health. And so I want to teach you a little bit about how that works by exploring a really interesting topic about how the brain uses your senses to fuel health. And I'm going to do this a little bit backwards, because I want you to understand the intensity, the importance, the extreme relevance of your physical senses in activating the brain to its fullest potential so that the brain can do its job and manage your health, bringing you to experience some of the best health you've ever experienced. So we're going to do it by first understanding what happens when we start to remove the senses, when we take them away. And so I want to jump right into something. It's a rough patch in history, but it teaches us a lot, and there was a really important lesson learned from this time frame. We're talking about World War II. So in World War II, there were a lot of POW camps. There were a lot of rules broken. There were concentration camps. In World War II, you saw a lot of human turmoil from what was going on. It was not pretty. There was nothing about it that I could say we can reflect on and say, "Oh, you know, that was the times." There was nothing. It was awful, okay? But the conditions that people experienced allowed us to reflect back at that time and learn some things, not only about how to conduct ourselves in things like war, which is never pretty anyway, but also to understand what happens under these certain conditions. And so the British Medical Journal actually did that. A few years after the war, they looked back and they started talking to people who were in these POW camps, or in situations where they were completely isolated from their friends. And what they found was quite astounding as it pertains to our understanding of health and the way the brain works. And they said this is part of their conclusion. They said, under conditions of darkness and absence of external sounds, the task of self-orientation becomes more difficult, especially if the prisoner feels he must not talk freely to himself because of the certain presence of a recording apparatus. In other words, they would not only put you in a completely isolated area, but they would tell you we're listening to anything, so they wouldn't even utter a word. They were too afraid that they might let something slip, especially soldiers who are trained to keep secrets. He is dependent on greatly restricted sensory intake, most of which must be initiated by himself. How many of you have seen in videos where they'll open up like a cage or a prison, a dark room, and somebody is rocking and almost like rubbing their own arms or like hitting themselves? They're actually reproducing what happens where you are trying to feel something because so much has been removed from you. Under these conditions, the distinction between dream and reality and between self and environment becomes less clear. There is evidence that maintenance of consciousness and the individual's awareness of his relationship with the environment is dependent on a steady stream of sensory impulses, both from without and from within. This is super important to understand. What they're talking about is your ability to be oriented to reality itself is completely and utterly dependent on sensory input from the environment around you and the environment within you. And so what I want to do is explore some of the senses that actually help us maintain an awareness of our environment, awareness of reality, an awareness of our consciousness, and what happens. We're going to explore what happens in the brain as it pertains to maintaining our health when all these things are fully present, okay? So we're going to explore both sides of this, and we're going to jump between what happens when we have full sensory immersion. I'm going to use that word a lot. So sensory immersion of all of our physical senses versus sensory deprivation when they're taken away, restricted, muted in some way, okay? And it's fascinating. I promise you, you'll be fascinated by this. And if you're not, I still am every time I teach it. So, so we have a common 5 senses. Here's one of them. What are our common 5 senses that we know? Sight, smell, taste, touch, and hearing. Yep. So those are our common 5. Now we have more like 10 or 11. We're going to go over 10 today. Okay, we talk about the common 5. The common 5 are really our ability to perceive the environment around us. We smell something on the outside of us. We touch something that's on the outside of us or on the inside of us. We hear something from somewhere else. We can also hear our own voice, but sound travels in our environment and we perceive it with our ears. We see things around us. My eyes don't go backwards and look into my brain, they look out, right? So it's about the outside environment. And taste, right? I take something from the outside and I taste it on the inside. It's a sense of what is it that I'm interacting with. And it gives you a clue as to how it's going to benefit or harm your body. But you have another 5, and they're largely to perceive our inside world. It's almost introspective senses, okay? So let's go through a few of them. Olfaction is the technical term for smell. It's the active process of smelling, Merriam-Webster. But basically what happens is when we inhale, we have these particles floating in the air from substances and foods and whatever, grandma's muffins, and they come into contact with these free nerve endings, right? So it's literally touching a nerve, and the nerve picks up on what is that. And we have a perception of smell. What's really interesting is I don't know that when you smell a muffin and I smell a muffin that we're smelling the same thing, but we both agree it's a muffin, right? I don't know that you actually sense it in the same way as me, but we have a common cultural agreement on what that smell actually is. I have kids, everybody knows a dirty diaper. It smells a certain way. So all I'm saying is there's all sorts of senses around us, but it's a chemical reaction on a free nerve ending, and it goes straight to the brain for interpretation. It's fascinating, but it's nerves. So again, here's a smelly diaper or a beautiful rose. Both have influence over what we're perceiving. And it's interesting, the sense of smell helps us keep things away or draw things close based on if it could cause us harm or just disgust or pleasure, which will bring close. Good scents, nice perfumes, things like that. Gustation is the technical word for taste. Okay, it's the act or taste, a sense of smelling. Merriam-Webster, they keep it pretty simple. But basically, a food or object will come into contact with chemoreceptors on the tongue. And we have 5 common types of taste. Do you guys know what the 5 types of taste are? Sour. Sweet. Salty. Bitter. There's one more. Okay, it's savory. It's also called umami, right? So you have these receptors for these types of flavors, but it's very much like the nose. It's a chemical reaction on nerves, and those nerves send a signal to the brain for interpretation. What did I just taste? And what's the combination of salt and sweet and bitter and sour and savory? What's that combination so I can identify it? I want to identify it. And it can help us spit it out of our mouth if it's awful, repulsive, or potentially harmful. Or, again, we swallow and eat some more if it's really good, right? So, again, kids have a funny sense of taste, but we taste different things and we have reactions to them. And, again, we can have different reactions to different tastes. Fascinating. Vision is sight, the ability to see. Basically, light waves in the visible spectrum come into our eye. They go through the lens, and they actually shine onto the backside of our eye, where we pick up, again, with nerves, different types of light. So both a grayscale, how much light or how dark is it, also what kind of color, and different receptors have different jobs. I'm not going to go over all of them, but we know that we have this visible light spectrum. It's basically the colors of a rainbow. Is there more light than what we can see? There's a ton of light that we can't see. Okay, X-ray is one of them. Invisible light, it actually shines straight through your body. It doesn't have the same type of shadow because it has a bit of potency to it. And X-ray film is actually just picking up the shadow of the light. So it's a bulb. It's emitting light. It's not really a bulb, but you can make it in different ways, make an X-ray beam in different ways. It is a source of light shining straight through your body, casting a shadow, hard object versus soft object. And the bones obviously block more light than the soft ones, so you get the shadow of the bones. Kind of fascinating. Here's another one, though. Let me ask you this, and you can raise your hand or not, but have any of you ever seen an aura around somebody before? Because I have. And it only happened once when I was juice fasting for like 3 weeks. I think it improved my eyesight. And what it does is it starts to expand beyond the normal, what we call the visible light spectrum, just into the boundaries of the next ones in the light wave frequency. So they actually have something called Kirlian photography where they can photograph outside of the normal visible light spectrum. They basically open up the light spectrum and take a photo, and they can see the light that's emitting off of you. So when people say, I see auras, don't look at them weird. They're actually just seeing in a broader spectrum than you are. Isn't that cool? But now we actually have the literally just photographic cameras. You go, Ch. Have you ever seen infrared? Totally different light spectrum, again. Right? There's multiple types of light spectrum and now technology to actually see it. So people just have a bit of a broader perception range. That's it. Now if they talk a little weird, I don't know, I see auras all over the place. To me, I was like, well, I want to. If it's real, I want to see it. I got to see it once. I never saw color, but I saw white around some people. And some people were brighter than others. And then I stopped that juice fasting and it went away. It never came back. It was really cool, and I was probably acting weird. So I was like, whoa, that's interesting. Anyway, Meccano Reception is actually the technical name for touch. It's the ability to detect and respond to mechanical stimuli in one's environment. Basically, you have these pressure sensors in your skin, in your joints, all over the place. Your entire body is covered in these pressure sensors. And anytime there's a type of pressure, the mechanoreceptors start firing a signal to the brain for interpretation. It gives you a sense of how much pressure is being put on that area. Okay? It's not all the textures. It has some texture to it, but it's very much a pressure sensor of your body. And it's interpreted by the brain to give you an idea of what I'm touching. So I can tell this is a smooth surface. I can tell this is a different surface. I can tell my clothes are a different surface, all by mechanoreception. Okay? Audition. Again, it's sound waves, a little bit different than light waves. It's actually energy traveling through the air, sending waves to our ears. Our ears pick it up, but it's traveling all over the place. You guys have seen waves on the beach, right? That's energy being transmitted through water. So a wave isn't a thing, it's just transmission of energy. But sound is very much the same. It's the transmission of energy in waves through air. And we pick it up, it vibrates our eardrum, it vibrates 3 little bones in our ear, goes into a little canal which vibrates water, which vibrates nerves that are sitting in that fluid, and those nerves will then send a signal to our brain, again for interpretation. So we don't understand what we hear in our ear, we understand what we hear in our brain. Same thing with sight, same thing with touch, same thing with taste and smell. So our brain is really picking up on our world. And collectively, you know, if you had a dirty diaper but smelled a muffin, you'd be like, this is so not right. Like, it's a mismatch. My senses aren't making a match out of this, right? So we actually have an expectation of certain things smelling a certain way because we once smelled them. If we saw a muffin, we saw someone cooking a muffin, we touched it, feels like a muffin, we smell it, smells like steak, you'd be like, I feel like I'm in a weird reality, right? This doesn't seem like normal. So we have an expectation of the collaboration of our senses to give us an accurate representation of our world. That's all I'm trying to say. So here's some that we don't often talk about. You guys know this one, Thermo Reception. Basically, hot or cold stimulus will cause thermoreceptors to send signals to the brain about what you just touched, whether it's hot or cold, and how hot or cold it is. And the more hot or the more cold it is, the quicker our interpretation and immediate response to it. So again, like if we're walking across coals, you're gonna feel it. You ever touch a hot stove? Or a hot pan or something like that? What happens when you touch it? Very quickly, right? Very quickly, we retract. What's really interesting about the nerves that pick up especially heat, and we're going to talk about pain in a second, is they don't have to go all the way to the brain for interpretation, for a response. They're actually linked to reflexes, which only go to the spinal cord and right back out to the muscles. They're basically intricately linked to retractor muscles. So our body has a self-defense mechanism that before we can cause harm or understand that it's harmful, we're already in a safe zone. I've touched things before where I'm like, my hand's already here, and I'm like, ow. Oh wait, that was a little bit of a delay, you know. You've experienced this before? Stepping on something sharp, really quick to retract, and then you understand what you just did. Cold will do it too. Not as bad because cold takes usually a bit longer to cause harm, so it'll only stimulate the thermoreceptor without the nociceptor, which we're going to talk about in a second, the pain. Okay? Graviception. I didn't get this definition, so don't blame me for this. I think it's a good one, but I'm going to read it as I found it, and then I'll explain what graviception is. So graviception refers to the sensory processes that contribute to the generation of neural signals encoding the orientation of gravity vector with respect to the organism. You want me to simplify it? That's down. Graviception is not one nerve sense. graviception is a sense system. Basically, it's taking information from a lot of your senses, especially mechanoreceptors and some other types of nerve cells, and it basically puts together this picture of where is pressure on my body whenever I'm in a certain position. And when we do that, we get this idea, this sense of which way is gravity coming from. Where is it pulling? So if I told you to close your eyes, just close your eyes for a second. If you lean to your left, can you point to down where gravity is, right? You know where it is because you feel it. I mean, I could turn this way and I can still know that gravity's pulling this way. It doesn't matter where I am in space. It's the sense of where I'm positioned and where the pressure is gives me an orientation to the vector of where gravity is. Very cool. Any of you do like a flip into a pool?
No, I have a neck problem.
Okay, well, ever in your life? No, you know when you jump in a pool and you're just flopping in the pool. It's chaotic, you're all over the place. If you keep moving for a second, because gravity's not putting a lot of pressure on you, you're basically in a weightless environment. It actually takes you a moment to know where down is. But if you pause for just a second, you can feel the pull of gravity and orient yourself up to go get air. It takes a second longer because you don't have that regular pressure from gravity actually compressing on your body in a weightless environment. But it's still pulling on organs. You can still feel tension of one part to another. So you just need to stop a second and then you get oriented again. It's fascinating. Again, I don't think I wrote this one. Confluence of signals from the joints, muscles, and disc interpreted by the brain to give us a sense of where gravity is originating. Basically, where's it pulling? So it doesn't matter what position you're in, upside down, in a pool, you're always going to get it. Barrow Reception. This is really cool. How many of you, you stand up and then all of a sudden you feel like you're going to pass out? Inside your blood vessels, you have pressure sensors to pick up the blood pressure of all the major arteries. And what happens is when you change position, like flipping upside down, like it's in the picture, or you go from a forward position or a seated position, you suddenly stand up, the blood just rushes down, in this case, the standing up, rushes down, and your body needs a second to send signals saying, whoa, the pressure, the blood pressure going to the head suddenly decreased. And so it sends a signal to the brain interprets it and says, we're going to change the blood vessels, tightens the lower ones, and make sure it diverts blood flow upward. And that's why it takes a second. You're like, whoa, I feel dizzy. Okay, I'm good now. That's actually the communication from the blood vessels to the brain, back to the blood vessels, which ones should dilate, which ones should constrict, to divert blood flow where it's needed as you change positions. How many of you are scared to go upside down, though? Any of you? Do you feel like you're not going to be able to like orient yourself, or do you feel that same thing? Like if I get up, I'm going to pass out. So it's trainable, just like a muscle. The more times you do it, the stronger this sense is going to get. The faster the nerve impulse is going to get, and the quicker you're going to recalibrate your blood pressure. So if you practice going forward, up, over and over, and you do it day after day, it'll take a little bit of time, but you'll notice that it gets smoother and faster over time. It's a trainable system. Okay? It's very cool. Nociception. This is pain. It's very much like Thermo Reception in that it's linked to our retractors, but it's a nauseous stimuli that will cause an action on a free nerve ending of these nociceptors. That's what the nerves are called, and it sends a signal to the brain that's interpreted as pain. This is relevant because in healthcare, a lot of people say, I'm in pain. Pain is not the problem. Pain is the signal of the problem. The way nociceptors, these nerves, work is very much like the check engine light on your car. If there's a problem under the hood, if there's a problem with the engine, if there's a problem with the mechanics of it or the computer system within it, you get a signal. It just says, check engine. That's all you get. Now it's your job to investigate what caused the problem. would it make any sense at all to take tape, black tape, and put it right over that thing so you no longer see the signal without ever investigating the problem? We do it every day in healthcare and call it good work. If a mechanic did it to you, you would call it a ripoff. But in healthcare, we go, you're a professional. I wouldn't let a mechanic do it. I also wouldn't let someone do it to my body. In fact, I would probably guard my body much, much more. Every day, we're doing that. And we're going to come back to that in just a little bit. So again, here's just an example of something that would cause pain. We feel pain because there's a puncture, because there's a separation of cells, because there's a laceration, because there's a break, because there's a problem. And then our brain is told of that problem through pain reception. And then proprioception, the perception of stimuli relating to position, posture, equilibrium, or internal condition. Basically, nerves in the muscles of the body, the disc of the spine, the joints, and the inner ear all send signals to converge in the brain and give us an awareness of our location in space and function in our bodies. Basically, you know, again, if you don't have to close your eyes, but if you put your hand behind you, you know where your hand is. It's your hand. All right? If you told somebody else, okay, you close your eyes, where's my hand? Well, they don't know. They don't have your proprioception. They have theirs, right? So it's unfair. You are aware of this. Kids are like this. How many fingers am I holding up? They don't have a clue that nobody else can feel what they feel. It's funny, you know, and they learn later that I have my own individual proprioception. We can both look at something. We can both smell something. Any of the senses that refer to the outside environment, we can share. We can share the experience. I can't share this experience. It's mine alone. Barrow Reception is mine alone. Thermo Reception is mine alone. Nociception is mine alone. Okay? Some are for me, some are for outside. So this is a good example. You know, somebody who's blind loses one sense, but uses the collaboration of other senses in order to orient themselves. And they can almost see without seeing. It's kind of cool. So all that to say this, the nerve system is a sensory-driven system. We have signals that orient in the brain or originate in the brain, and they get sent down the body. And as they get sent down the body, what we have is action, right? So the brain sends a signal and the body responds. Basically, the body is subservient to the brain. No part has a mind of its own. It doesn't do whatever it wants. It is completely and totally under the direction of the brain. And so we have these signals that come down. So if, in this case, if it's the elbow, maybe it's the bicep, the brain would tell the bicep contract and we would have flexion of the arm. Because I got a signal. That muscle's just sitting there. It's not doing anything. It doesn't think for itself. It doesn't just go, I don't know, I feel like spasming. It doesn't do that. In fact, if you lose signal, think Christopher Reeves, right? Loss of signal between the brain and the body, so he lost function. He only broke his neck. He didn't break every bone and tear every muscle, but none of them worked. None of them worked because there was no signal. So it's a sensory-driven system in this, and this is what we're going to unpack today. We went over the senses, but the way the brain works is the first thing that initiates brain activity is a signal from the body to the brain. Always talking about the brain to the body, but the body influences the action of the brain. Here's how it works. We have our brain, and the brain is collecting information about the world around us and within us from the senses we already discussed. So we have our external stimulus. Hey, what's around me? If I'm standing here, there's a chair here. I can see it. I'm on a stage. I can feel it. I can feel that there's wood under here, but it's carpeted, right? I can tell its quality. I can hear that the air conditioning's blowing, okay? I don't smell much right now. It's kind of neutral in the room, right? And I don't taste anything because I'm not eating anything. So I'm using basically 3 of my external senses to orient myself to this room. I also have internal stimuli. These are the ones we talked about that give us an understanding of other things. So I know from Thermo Reception that it's a little cool in the room. My hand can feel it, but I'm warm under the jacket, right? I can tell the difference between them. Now, I don't think about it, but my brain's always paying attention to this. I know where gravity is, right? I have a spatial awareness. I know that I'm not standing awkwardly, right? I'm hopefully standing somewhat normal, but I feel like I am because I feel oriented to that. Okay, so I'm using my senses to also perceive the world around me. Some are conscious, some are very unconscious. In fact, most of it's unconscious. And we also have functional change. This is just the systems of our body, our digestive system, our heart, our lungs, our liver, our spleen, just reporting to the brain all the time. What's going on? What's going on? What's going on? Here's a status update on what I'm doing and how everything's working, okay? You know, my immune system. Hey, we're free of any infection. Or, hey, we got a little bacteria. We're going to take care of it. You know, it's just reporting. That's all. And so as all this information comes into the brain collects it and paints a picture. Where are you? How are things going? What do I need to change so that your insides work its best, regardless of what's going on outside? And what we call that is homeostasis. You guys heard that word before? Homeostasis is just the maintenance of our inside environment. It's just making sure our body works, okay? And I think we learned this in elementary school, right? Homeostasis. But that is such a significant concept. Sometimes we use it more for like nature, like, oh, we disrupted the balance of nature. Well, we're disrupting the balance of our body all the time. We're losing homeostasis. And so the brain's job is to try to maintain it, maintain your health, maintain internal stability, maintain homeostasis. And it does so by, once it gets this picture of what's going on in and around you, it sends signals down to the body to change the body to meet the needs of homeostasis. Basically, like if it got really cold in here, we tapped the AC down, it was like 55 degrees, and you weren't moving, but I was jumping around, I'd probably be warm and you'd probably be shivering. Because your brain would be telling your body, you need to create some heat. Right? I'm creating my own from movement, you're sitting there, so your brain goes, yeah, you're not taking care of yourself, so I'm going to do it for you. And all of a sudden you start shaking. Okay? It is a response to the environment to maintain homeostasis, maintain core temperature that's best for you. So it's fascinating. And you know what's even more fascinating? It's about a 40-to-1 ratio input to output. There is so much more information going into the brain than coming out of the brain. It's a huge amount more. And the brain filters what's relevant, what's important, and it discards everything that's irrelevant. It just kind of says, yeah, I'm not gonna filter that, I'm not gonna acknowledge that, it's just unnecessary. Whoa, that's important, send it through. Right? So as the relevant information gets through, it's then able to judge and change the function of the body to maintain it. Hey, you know, all of a sudden you scrape a knee. Well, whatever pain signals are coming through, it's a signal to the brain that, hey, I have damage down here. The brain goes, yeah, that's important. Send it through. So it sends it through, processes it, and then starts changing the knee, the scrape. It's going to clot the blood vessels so that you stop bleeding. It's going to send white blood vessels so that if any nasty stuff got inside, it'll kill it right on the spot. And then it'll start to heal, all in response. So this chart, this little diagram, is one of the most significant little diagrams that you could understand to understand how health works. Because health is actually a response to your senses. Let's unpack it a little bit more. Again, let's go back to sensory deprivation. What happens if we take it away again? Okay, we explored it a little bit with the British Medical Journal after World War II. This was an experiment. They put these workers in this room and they asked them to stay there for 24 hours. It was dark. There was absolutely no sound. They had padded walls so it would mute any sound that even they made. Okay, there was no clocks. There was no anything. It was just them in a dark room with one button in the middle that they could push when they were ready to get out. It only took a matter of hours before these are workers at the company, before they lost it. And some of them were in there for like 17 hours. They thought they were in there for 4 days. They had no orientation of time, change, nothing. So they said this: some workers have described a well-marked sequela to sensory deprivation, including disturbances of thinking, imagery, time appreciation, and delusional and hallucinatory phenomena. Couldn't tell the difference between dream and reality because their senses were deprived. You shut off the collaboration of information. They couldn't do anything. They were even trying to stimulate their own senses, Meccano Reception, anything to just give them some sort of orientation, but left long enough, they did not do well. This is isolation units within prisons, right? This stuff really does go on. They actually call it special housing unit syndrome, and this is from some of the information they found about this, but numerous studies have documented the effects of solitary confinement on prisoners, giving them the special name special housing unit syndrome. Some of the many special housing unit syndrome symptoms include visual and auditory hallucinations, again, hypersensitivity to noise and touch, because if you got some senses shut down, other ones amplify. We hear that with people who are blind or deaf or mute. Insomnia and paranoia, uncontrollable feelings of rage and fear, distortions of time and perception, increased risk of suicide, and PTSD from losing your sense of awareness of reality because your brain can't get enough information. This is the reality we're living in. We have created that world. We literally reproduced it in our everyday lives. We have people working 8 hours, sitting, not moving, gray cubicles, buzzing sounds, no change, can't see the sun, the AC is blowing at a consistent 72, no change in temperature, right? And then you get home and you go in an air-conditioned car home, but at least your visual perception changes. You get home, and how many times are people just, again, sitting, not even moving their body, not even stimulating Meccano Reception in front of a TV that's just buzzing in front of them? It's so unchanging. So when that happens, we end up experiencing certain conditions that are extremely similar to what is described in the isolation units, sensory deprivation chambers, and some of these POW campsite type situations. And I'm going to go over a few of them. One of them, which is really interesting, is called fibromyalgia. You guys heard of fibromyalgia? So fibromyalgia is a disorder characterized by widespread musculoskeletal pain accompanied by fatigue, sleep, memory, and mood issues. Researchers believe that fibromyalgia amplifies painful sensations by affecting the way your brain processes pain signals. It's from the Mayo Clinic, right? Basically, they're saying that the brain is getting a sense of pain, but nothing's initiating it. I heard it in another article. It says basically your brain or something is amplifying the signal of pain. It's like it's turning up the volume, but nothing's there to initiate it. Look, if I touch something, if I touch this, I feel cloth. If someone with fibromyalgia touches it, they might feel abrasion. It's not abrasion. It's an inappropriate sense of what this actually is. It's amplification of pain with no painful thing happening to you. So again, it's a poor perception of the world around you. Anxiety, another one. Anxiety is an unpleasant state of inner turmoil, often accompanied by a nervous behavior such as pacing back and forth, somatic complaints, and rumination, which is going over something over and over again, which happens also in sensory deprivation, talking to yourself, like hitting yourself, rubbing your arms to create some sort of stimulation. It's also a form of rumination. Somatic complaints means your body hurts. You literally get pain in your body, or your body starts dysfunctioning and it changes the way it's functioning from anxiety. Anxiety, the way it's described, is basically some similar effects of sensory deprivation. Depression's another one. This is actually a excerpt from a blog, and I looked at some definitions, but it's so poorly worded because depression is experienced so vastly different by each individual. So I took a really interesting one. She said, the irony is that some of the antidepressants and anti-anxiety medications we use to overcome mood disorders can also cause emotional numbness. My short-lived experience taking amitriptyline and then Prozac gave me a feeling of being flatlined emotionally. I wasn't sad, but I also wasn't happy. I was simply there. What she's saying is I was in a depressed state and they numbed me. Look, this is a brain that's depressed, right? It's low brain activity. But based on the way the body's designed, anatomy and physiology, brain activity is stimulated first by your senses. It's a sensory-driven system. So if that's a depressed brain, that's not depressed, that means that is not enough input. And if you don't have enough input, and then you're handed a pill that's designed to numb you, you're essentially trying to numb numbness. And you can't do that. That's why almost every single depression medication warns you of possible worsening depression, because it's numbing numbness itself. It will never work. Here's an example, Paxil, right? Here's some of the symptoms of Paxil. I'm not going to read them all. I highlighted a few of them. Sleepiness or unusual drowsiness. Some of these are the visceral changes, the somatic changes in the body, but these are the ones that I found were quite similar to when you look up the sensory deprivation, what you would experience in your body, especially if it's prolonged beyond what the workers did in 24 hours. Sleepiness or unusual drowsiness, trouble with sleeping, abnormal dreams, like you can't tell which is dream, which is reality, discouragement, feeling sad or empty, feelings of unreality. Are you kidding me? Lack of emotion, loss of interest or pleasure, problems with memory, sense of detachment from self or body. It's like line by line what happens in sensory deprivation. Tingling, burning, or prickling sensations, trouble concentrating. Your brain doesn't even work right. And then this is the warning. Tell your doctor immediately if you notice worsening depressions and other psychiatric conditions, unusual behavior changes including possible suicidal thoughts and attempts, or mental mood changes including new or worsening anxiety, panic attacks, trouble sleeping, irritability, hostile or angry feelings, impulsive actions, severe restlessness, or very rapid speech. Like seriously. But don't worry. Your doctor recommends it. Are you kidding me? What is he recommending? That I drive myself into the exact same problem I'm trying to escape from. No wonder people commit suicide. And I'm not saying that as a joke. I'm not saying that as a joke. Because every single suggestion that they're given by someone who says they're helping them is driving them into the condition they're trying to escape from. So then they try to take the quick route out. Not to hurt themselves, to break out of prison. It's the break out of prison. They feel like they need that little red button that the workers got. All they had to do was hit a button and the door's open. They're out. And people that are living in this are trying to get the button. They just want out. That's it. It's not a problem with the person. Wanting freedom is a natural desire. It is totally a natural desire. And so people should be able to experience real freedom. They shouldn't have to feel like they're imprisoned, especially when they're being told that that's help. Okay? Here's another one, Vicodin, for pain, right? Drugs.com. Most of these opiates involve the central nerve system and smooth muscle. The precise mechanism of action of hydrocodone and other opiates is not known. although it is believed to relate to the existence of opiate receptors in the central nervous system. In addition to analgesia, narcotics may produce drowsiness, changes in mood, and mental clouding. Again, do you know why? Because that is designed to interrupt a nerve signal from your body to your brain. It's numbing you. Again, it's shutting you down. You're not wired for that. Vicodin, here's some side effects. Drowsiness, sleepiness, changes in mood, fear or nervousness, unusual drowsiness, dullness, tiredness, weakness, or feelings of sluggishness. It's mostly tiredness with this one because you're cutting off pain receptors, but you're supposed to feel pain, so you know that's the problem. Vicodin is the tape over the check engine light. So this is the truth. Living without sensing is like living in a dream. You can't tell the difference. And most of the drugs are designed to interrupt a nerve signal, which means most drugs are actually designed to shut down your perception of the problem but never actually heal it. Just saying, that's not exactly a solution. In the body, you can also have something going on. I don't want to just stick on drugs. It's a problem, yes, but the point of it isn't drugs are bad. The point of it is that you're made to have input so that you can experience health as a response to the information your brain's getting. In your body, you can have an interruption in the signals between the body and the brain mechanically. Okay, it's not always chemically. This is mechanical. So I'm going to go over a little bit of a chart. We actually use this in our seminars when we teach other doctors. I'm not going to go into every detail, but I just want you to see a little bit of the connections, the dots connecting, and then I'll simplify it again. But in the body, we have this upper cervical area which has a huge amount of input, specifically proprioception. Remember we talked about proprioception? It's our spatial awareness. So one of our most sensitive areas that give us an orientation of where we are in space comes from the upper neck. And these muscles here of the upper neck are extremely sensitive. They have a lot of information that they send to the brain. So there's also information from the discs and also the joints of the neck, and the higher you go, the more sensitive it gets. These are mostly mechanoreceptors, which provide the information that you need for proprioception. So mechanoreception is the sense of touch, but collaborating between multiple areas of mechanoreception, it gives you a sense of awareness of where you are. All that information comes together and it goes up to the brain. And as it goes up to the brain, it goes into the thalamus, but more importantly, one of the areas it goes to it's called the vestibular nucleus. It's the posture control center. The input, especially from the neck, directly influences your understanding of where you are according to gravity, which means you need to contract different muscles to keep yourself upright against it. You don't think about it, but it happens all the time. If you're getting poor or imbalanced information in, basically, if you're standing here but your brain's saying you're straight, it may collect the wrong information about where you really are and change your posture to compensate for a place you're really not. Poor information in, poor information out. So the signal from the brain to the muscles becomes imbalanced as a response to something that's not actually there. So we get imbalanced legs. That's why we check the legs, right? We check to see if you're imbalanced because we're really checking the system, the balance system, not just as one leg longer. That's honestly irrelevant to your health. All of a sudden trying to test what your brain's doing, that's relevant. It goes up to the limbic area. This is your emotional brain. So basically, the input, even from the upper neck, can start to influence the way that your emotional center works, and it can drive you into chronic stress. It neurologically puts you in a state of chronic stress without there being a stressor on the outside. Basically, the inside input is overwhelming even the outside input. This is when you can be on vacation, sitting on a beach, and you feel totally stressed out, your heart's beating out of your chest, and you have no idea why. Because the input's wrong. You should feel relaxed. So as it does that, it changes quite a few things, including our hormones, okay? So we can have hormone imbalances, again, from a mechanical misalignment. Basically, imbalanced input. provides an imbalanced output. It could be posture, it could be hormones, it could be emotions, it can be stress. And then as we look at this, it also, as we follow the chain of connections in the brain, it does affect the way our organs work, the way our blood vessels work. It affects the way our discs are held stable. Our immunity is actually going to be directly affected by this. Literally all by input, and so much of it's coming from the neck just because of its level of sensitivity. So as we take a look back, this is just a series of connections, all starting from just mechanoreceptors. One sense, 1 out of the 10 we talked about, affecting all of that. Just to give you a little, I wanted to give you a perspective of how important one sense is to your entire body, okay? So this is really the simplification. We went over it already. The input determines the output. The information in is going to tell our brain what's going on around and within us, and then our brain interprets it and tries to provide the best game plan to change the body to maintain homeostasis. That's it. So junk in, junk out. Good input in, good input out. You experience health when you have great input. So there's a couple things that you can do if you want to try to change your health. Okay, we talked a little bit about anxiety and depression. You know, one of the best solutions that people have come up with is retreats. When you're going through that, to be able to retreat from all of your environment that's causing, or what feels like it's causing the stress and the anxiety, and to be able to recontextualize it. And usually at a retreat, you're outside almost all day, you're around people, you're actually talking, there aren't things that are scary or threatening or anything. So you step back and you're changing your environment, you're changing the input completely. And you're able to reorient yourself to the situation that you left at home. Okay, but there's some other things that you can do. When we look at this, you know, you can change your environment, but spend time in nature. Why would you want to spend time in nature as opposed to a cubicle in a bland building? Different sounds. Yeah, the light is constantly changing. There's clouds moving, the wind's blowing. You hear separate things. Your body craves nature. How many of you've gone to hiking or out to the woods or the beach or somewhere where there's just no people, it's pure nature? Do you feel alive? It's because you're flooding your brain with all this input that you're made for. And your brain's going, thank you, I've just been trying to do my job. And you come home and you feel so much healthier because you literally activated your brain to its fullest potential. So move your body, okay? Brighten up your living and workspace. Let natural light in. Let it change through the day. Listen to quality music. Gosh, the music alone. Music has a powerful influence over it. They've done experiments where they've had like greenhouses where they'll take a whole greenhouse and play like hateful rock music, like just awful screaming music at the plants, and then other where it's just classical, like beautiful classical music, and they'll leave it for days. You know what happens? The plants with the rock music wither, and the ones with the classical music almost double in size. And they've repeated this over and over. They've done it with water, dishes of water. They play different music in different areas at water. The water with the beautiful music turns like crystalline, beautiful colors. The other one turns black. Literally turns black. Just to give you a perspective of the influence of some of our senses and our environment on us, okay? So stimulate your senses and think about the ones you have. Find ways to completely immerse yourself in it, in good sensations. Chemical solutions. Look, we talked about drugs. It's a serious issue, but if a drug is designed to interrupt a nerve signal, that is pretty much all of them, essentially, then you need to get it out of your system so that there's nothing blocking the signal from getting to your brain. In other words, if we keep taking this stuff, we're literally intentionally putting ourselves in the prison we hate. So get out of prison. Get out of prison. Stop putting this stuff in your body that is causing your brain to shut down. And instead, remove it and immerse your brain in the things that it actually needs. It'll completely change the way your brain works. Clean up your food, your air, your water, to not include toxins. Basically, you just want to take anything out of your environment that's going to come into you and make sure it doesn't come into you. You don't want bad water. You know, it doesn't have to be expensive water, but you just don't want toxic stuff. You don't want food that has a ton of pesticides and chemicals laden in it. You want real food, you want real water, you want real air, as clean as you can, okay? And then here's the thing, we also need to identify the mechanical problems, identify the root cause of the mechanical nerve interference if there is some. You have to look and see, but if there is, you have to correct that cause. Again, don't put duct tape on it. Find the problem, the root problem, and take care of that. So this whole class is relevant to me as an upper cervical chiropractor because our area is in the mechanical side. I am in no way saying that that is the solution to all things, because we just went over it. We can be doing it from the environment we put ourselves in. We can be imprisoning ourselves. We can chemically be imprisoning ourselves. But this is another form of essentially imprisonment from ever being able to experience the full potential of your brain and subsequently the full potential of your health. So this is what we do. Anybody that comes in, we're always going to do a detailed examination because we're trying to find, number one, what is your problem, but we're trying to find out where is it originating. And we're specialists, so we specialize in the upper cervical spine, but it is the most sensitive area of the spine as it pertains to the input to the brain. So we're going to do a detailed examination, very neurologically based, to find if there's a neurological interference in the signals between the brain and the body, and if it's coming from the upper neck. That basically qualifies somebody to become a patient. We wouldn't see somebody if we didn't find that. But if we do find that, we move on and we take a really particular type of X-ray. The X-ray itself is normal, but the views that we're taking give us a three-dimensional perspective of what's going on in the upper neck. Basically, we're able to find out where the bones are in relationship to one another that's causing this mechanical nerve interference. Once we take the X-rays, we're going to analyze them very specifically. We're going to measure the bone angles and relationships so that we get an understanding of exactly where this is in 3D in your body and where the problem is and how mathematically to correct it. So we use a lot of precision in the calculations we get. Once we get those calculations, we also take into account when we position a patient for an upper cervical correction, where are they in space? We need to understand what do we need to do three-dimensionally to correct the problem, but also where are you originating so our vectors and everything are right. When we get all this information, we're able to make a very calculated and precise adjustment using a percussive sound wave. So it causes no pain, okay? It's a sound wave itself that's going to be moving that bone. It's a click. Okay, so all the work is on the front end. It's all in the details of the calculation to find out where's the problem, where are the bones in relationship to one another that's causing this nerve interference. We get a very specific angle and correct it. As you can see in this picture, it's off the skin. This isn't something that pokes you or prods you. This is a gentle sound wave correction. It's the most gentle correction we have in chiropractic at all. And the purpose of doing it is to wake up the brain. Okay? It's what's the point of getting things straight if it makes no change in your health? The point of it is to align these bones so that the input is balanced. When the input is balanced, it activates the brain, more information comes through, there's no blocking of information, and the brain is able to accurately perceive the world around you and within you and make changes in response to it to start to restore the health of your body. And once restored, it's also designed to maintain homeostasis of the body. So aligning the spine, especially the upper cervical spine, is about activating the brain. That's why we do it. I like straight things. We lined up the chairs straight, but aligning your bones with no change to your health is a waste of both of our times. Okay? This is relevant. we have this phrase that we use, it's holding is healing. And what I mean by that is, if we're going to make a correction to your spine, what is the point of making a correction for it to slip back out, to make it again, to slip back out? And we go on and on for months and years and just keep repeating ourselves just because we see each other. Makes a whole lot more sense if we're going to correct the problem and work to stabilize it so it stays in place. Okay, everybody's different, every case is different. Sometimes there's some problems with stability, maybe old injuries, but for the most part, we're able to work towards getting this spine stable. So every single day, your brain and your body are talking with this perfect communication. That is what we're doing here, is making sure the input is restored so the output is correct, and the result to you is health. The brain is a fascinating organ. Too often we only learn the one side, and I hope that by looking at this you understand the relevance, the importance, things that both you can do yourself and sometimes you need help with, someone to come alongside you, not to control you, but to remove the interference that's causing the breakdown in this system so that you can experience the health that you're actually designed to live in, but not experiencing because of an interference that's in the way. So just to wrap up, this is a quote from B.J. Palmer, who's the founder of the chiropractic field and really the founder of upper cervical chiropractic, this idea that the upper neck could have such a profound influence on health. And he said this: "You never know how far-reaching something you think, say, or do today will affect the lives of millions tomorrow." I want you guys to share this information. I don't say it to keep it secret. But share this information with others so that they can experience the understanding of how their body works, the freedom of taking control of their own health, and understand that there are people out there that can come alongside of you and help remove some of these obstacles so that you can experience that health as well. So thank you all for coming. It's been an honor and a pleasure, and I hope to see you at another seminar soon. Okay, thanks so much. So, do any of you have any questions? And thanks so much for being patient. I don't know if anybody had any questions, but...
The prison thing kind of goes into some of what I was researching over the summer.
Yeah.
And as far as like death sentences that have been commuted because of the hallucinations and everything that have been declared mental health issues now. So if they're recognizing in one aspect that's causing this, why do you know why they keep doing it, knowing that it's like a creation of what they call mental health now?
But they're creating that mental health issue.
Exactly. They're creating it. So they've labeled it, mental health issues, but it wasn't there before the isolation.
There's been some prisons. I don't know where this was. My wife, her undergrad was in psychology, and she had done some studies on this, but they were comparing, they actually took some, I think it was state prisons, and in one of them they played like heavy music or none at all. I think they did some with no music, some with like heavy aggravating music, and then some with like classical, like beautiful orchestra music every day. And the people that were listening to this classical music, like the prison got peaceful, people would talk different, they started collaborating, they had ideas, and they started to see like the environment that you create in a prison can actually determine the outcome. Now, I don't know why it never had an impact on like the systems, but basically they proved that you can dictate the outcome by the environment you create. You can literally change it.
Almost want it to happen.
Yes, that would have to be.
Want it to happen, so.
Well, the pharmaceutical companies, look, they do the research. All I'm saying is just to make it clear, I have a way bigger problem with the pharmaceutical industry than I do individual doctors, okay? Doctors usually become doctors to help people, but they were handed a giant bag of pills and said, go at it, with no other tools, really. They don't even, I think they learn like 6 hours of nutrition in their entire school career. 6 hours. Your entire body is made